We're down in Plymouth today at Princess Yachts to take a look at a boat that hasn't even been launched to the general public yet. Now that boat is the S65, the second largest of the S-Class boats. And as the boat designed to straddle the very top ends of the F-Class Flybridge line and the V-Class Sports Cruiser line, this is a boat we're very excited to try out. As you would expect of an S-Class yacht, the helm position is particularly attractive on this main deck, not least because the flybridge, of course, is shifted further aft and dropped down. So what we have here is plenty of space for a huge all-over sunroof that actually operates as 3 individual skylights as well. So there's plenty of visibility here when you're heeling over into a turn to port, and plenty of light as well. Loads of headroom as well, which actually, when you look at the profile of the boat, you wouldn't necessarily anticipate, because like the larger S72, it's a particularly sleek looking yacht. In terms of the practicalities here at the helm, we've got a couple of adjustable seats and a good foot brace. We also have an adjustable wheel here, I think. Yeah, that's right. Plus a couple of 16-inch plotters and the engine display in the centre there, a little bit of switch gear, and as you can probably hear on the audio, some air conditioning, and I really enjoy that. We've got the usual vents up here on top of the dash, plus an absolutely vast vent just down here on the right hand side, right next to my backside, exactly where I'd want it when it heats up as it is doing today. We also got a skipper's door here on the starboard side to access that side deck. Plenty of tying off points there for your fenders. So in terms of seamanship practicality, it's really very good, and it's made all the better by the fact we've got a drop-down window on the port side. So actually I can communicate very easily with people on the port side when I'm trying to come alongside. What we want to do though is get this boat up to speed, because of course it's an S-Class yacht, and that means that in spite of the fact that it has a flybridge, the centre of gravity is kept relatively low. So we're hoping it performs more like a V-Class yacht than like an F-Class yacht. So we'll just engage these throttles and get going. Now already we're doing 28, 29 knots. That's achieved very quickly. And actually as we move up and onto the plane, I've got to say the bow lift is relatively modest. At no stage do I lose sight of that horizon. That's not so much the case on the companion seating over on the port side there. It's relatively low slung. So although you have good views all round through these big full height windows, you don't tend to get a very good view forward from those port seats. Let's just give her a little play, swing around to starboard first. Now you'll see that the heel is very game indeed. There's a good tight turn there. I reckon we're spinning our boat 180 degrees in the space of about 3 or 4 boat lengths, which is not bad at all. And when I come back onto the straight, yeah, she evens up an absolute treat, very quick, very snappy. You can tell that this is not a traditional flybridge yacht. You can tell there's not too much weight up top. In terms of a cruising range, well, this boat comes as standard with a pair of 2,050 litre tanks, so 4,100 litres in total. So if we keep 20% back as a reserve, we're working with 3,300 usable litres. Now that's a pretty significant amount for a boat of this size. So when you're cruising at 20 knots, we're consuming 12 litres per nautical mile, so that's a range of about 280 miles, which is very good indeed. You can increase the pace, of course, to around about 28 knots. That increases the fuel flow to 15 litres per nautical mile, reduces the range to about 220 miles. But in all honesty, right up to the top end, around about 34, 35 knots, it doesn't get much worse than that. The maximum is around about 16 litres per nautical mile, just over. So you're still hitting, even at the top end, a 200 mile range. And if you want to really eke that out, then just drop it right down to 8 knots. 3 litres per nautical mile, you can exceed 1,000 miles very easily indeed. In any case, though it drives like a traditional sports cruiser, this is in fact a flybridge boat. So what we ought to do is come off the gas, head up those stairs, and see what the fly position is all about. Now it's clear from the start that this upper helm is ergonomically very good. For a start, it's very long. It's a big unit, and that means that we've got space to shift the skipper towards the centre where you'd ideally want to be. And there's still room to the side of me for a co-pilot to get in and out without disturbing me if I'm busy driving or manoeuvring. Again, we've got a pair of 16-inch plotters and the data display with a good size of compass directly on top in our eye line, adjustable seat and adjustable wheel. We've also got the throttles and tabs on our right hand next to the VHF, and as downstairs we have the proportional thrusters, bow and stern, here on the left hand side. But what I instantly like is the fact that visibility is so good. And you might say, well, it's obvious that it would be on the flybridge, but what I'm talking about is my capacity to see the bow of the boat, and not just the forepeak, but a good section of the bow, so I know where that's going, I know what that's heading into, and I find that quite reassuring. On a lot of kind of sport bridge cruisers where the flybridge is set back and you have sunroofs ahead of that, the mouldings of that structure can obscure your view, and this is very reassuring indeed, particularly of course if you stand up. You really can see the parameters of the boat, and because of the big aperture for the stairs on that port side, I can also see the swim platform and the port quarter, so that is also pretty reassuring. We'll get her up onto the plane and stick the C's on our beam. There's a good bit of grunt there, and we got some decent winds here, maybe force 3 or 4, and these C's are building up a touch, hitting us on the port beam there, so we'll just play with the tabs a touch to level ourselves up. This is quite welcome, because what looked like a very placid day has just kicked off a little bit, and I can see that actually the spray deflection here is very good indeed. Kicking it well wide, kind of into the breeze, with sufficient vigour that it's not making its way inboard. It's barely even touching the side deck aft. It's certainly not reaching up here to the wind deflector or the flybridge. And of course, it's quite good fun, if I just head into those seas, to have a bit of a play up here, because of course we're further from the centre of heel, which of course exaggerates that sensation. Really accentuates what a playful little boat this is to drive. Just adjust my seat, adjust that wheel a little bit, adjust my seat a bit more. There we are, that's better. That's much more comfortable. I'm a 6-footer, and adjusted like this, I could do a great many miles very contentedly. And it's also quite nice to know if the weather does turn, well, we got our canvases wrapped around here, ready rigged, ready to go. So there's no fuss at all if you need to get those up at the double. And there is also the option of a hardtop up here, just to shade you in this forward part of the boat. Leaves the aft end of this flybridge nice and open, so you can continue enjoying the sunshine. This then is a thoroughly enjoyable boat to drive. If you don't need a big, full-size traditional flybridge, if you're happy to take something smaller up top, then the extra vigour, the extra enjoyment this boat buys you from the Helm is well worth that compromise. We're back alongside now, and I've stepped off the boat just to give you a better sense of the perspective here, because this is a very sleek looking piece of equipment by the standards of a flybridge cruiser. As I say, the flybridge is set further aft and lower down, really reduces the profile, makes it far more dynamic looking than a traditional flybridge cruiser. We also have this long hull window, tapered aft, kind of in an S shape, and we've become accustomed to that from S-class models in the Princess fleet. The larger 72 has a rather lovely bit of detailing on the engine vents, and you don't get that here. But if you like the S72, then chances are you're going to enjoy a lot of the elements of the outdoor spaces here on the S65 too, and it all starts with the back end here. Now, of course, we have a high-low platform here, and that's big enough for a 3.25 metre tender, but we also have a tender garage that runs fore and aft inside this section, exactly as you get on the larger 72. That's a major treat. That's topped with plenty of cushions, as you can see, with integrated headrests and a wraparound guardrail. While the crew cabin is accessed from the swim platform on the S72, well, we have limited space here, so it's accessed instead from on top of the sunbed. The hatch is relatively small and the ladder is relatively steep, But once you're down in this space, I have to say the layout makes a lot of sense. So we have a single 4.5 bed inboard directly next to the bulkhead for that tender garage. We also have plenty of storage on the starboard side, both slide out drawers and high volume hanging storage. And we have this, I look forward, an opening door that takes you through to your own shower and head compartment. It's not massive, there's not a tremendous amount of natural light. It's a very welcome feature, and as I say, you don't necessarily have to have the crew cabin. You can leave this as storage space, do away with these various bulkheads that confine this zone, and open the underdeck space right out to the port side for extra engineering equipment. And we'll take a look into that when we go beneath the deck on the port side in a second. But first, let's close that up and step into the cockpit, because this is also broadly similar to the layout we see on the S72. It all starts with a fixed U-shaped dinette aft with a fold-out table. We also have a corner seat here built into the back end of the superstructure, and that superstructure extends aft, and that gives you a really cozy, comfortable place to sit without impoverishing your view of the sea. And if I sit down in here and face aft, well, that's a lovely sociable position. It integrates really beautifully both with that forward-facing bench and that internal galley. Now let's make our way forward toward the bow space, because that combines adjustable sunbeds and a high-capacity dining station in equally convincing fashion. Now let's spin around and take a little look at the headrest solution, because this broadly mimics that of the S72, and that's certainly a good thing. You can lift up this headrest, set it in a variety of positions, and face two people forward on this starboard sun lounger. You can achieve the same, of course, on the port side. Or you can drop that back into the place, lift up this section instead, and create a two-man aft-facing settee. Again, one on either side, enabling you to seat as many as 8 people around this deep-set lounge. I'm sure you will have noticed already that actually the furniture here is extremely low slung. If I pop my hand there, you can see it's about 8 to 9 inches high from the deck. The purpose of that, of course, as I say, is to retain the low profile dynamics of this boat, keep the weight low, keep the aesthetics as dynamic as possible. And it really does work. We saw it on the S72 and it works equally well here. Certainly means that the chairs are more casual than formal, but that's not a bad thing at all. And if I move to the forepeak, we have a pair of hatches. The starboard hatch gives you access to the anchor chain, and the port hatch contains a neat little tray, which is the perfect spot to stow your lines. As you can see, they haven't made best use of the entire volume of that bow space, but it's pretty practical nonetheless. Spinning around, we've got additional rails there, additional cup holders integrated, and extra storage here as well. If I lift that up, you'll see we've got good space there, even for 3 or 4 bulbous fenders, and we have the same on the other side. So it's a pretty hard-working bow, but arguably the most satisfying space on the boat as regards al fresco entertainment is that flybridge. So we're headed straight up there now. Well, we've mentioned these before. Very, very easy gradient. Very easy to get up there without banging your head because the aperture is so huge. And it's this aperture that enabled us to see that port quarter when we were standing up there at the flybridge helm. So in all kinds of regards, it works very well indeed. This pole, though used as a strut to support the flybridge, is also a useful grabbing point. Plenty of grab rails as we go up. And when we get up here, I quite like the fact that you're not immediately confronted with a wet bar. This here is just, well, it's full of covers and various other bits and bobs at the moment, but as you can see, it's a cool box. There's our 2 helm seats. There's our companion seating. There's our starboard dinette, and there's the wet bar at the very aft end, exactly where you would want it. It means that if you come to anchor, bow into the breeze, all the smells and the fumes and the mess disappear aft instead of inconveniencing the people sitting down. And what we have here is a decent little sink and a good size of electric barbecue. No gas options on Princess these days. There's a bin too, and if you need somewhere to stick your sink lid, well, I'm not sure it's actually designed for this, but there's a little trough directly next to the strut. That makes a good spot for it and actually protects the people on the seat from any mess. What I also like down here is this, and I haven't seen this before, a little cutout here in the aft mouldings. So if you're sitting on this aft bench, you can just peek down, wave to the guys on that sunbed on the lower deck. Just feel like the two parties are in some way integrated. In any case, this dinette up here is a really good size. Fold out leaves again raised rather than sunken hinges, which I'm quite surprised at. But I reckon you could easily fit 8 people around there, no problem at all. There's a little bit of storage inside there as well. And this windy style contraption here is quite handy too. I'll just grab it with the other hand and push it forward. Aft, I should say. There we are. When we rig it like that, you create extra space for the people facing forward. And there's also an infill here. You can see we've got a little extended lip of fiberglass, so you can pop an infill in there, pop a cushion on top, and create a good size of sun pad directly adjacent to the helm station. Now let's make our way back down these steps to the cockpit and take a look at the saloon, because if the width of those side decks is anything to go by, we ought to see some really good volume in here, and that's absolutely what we get. Now as we go in here, you'll see we've got a single level threshold. That's all the rage these days. And in terms of the layout, it's really very easy to understand. We've got a nice big galley at the aft end, kind of projects out a little bit because of this hinged up window section into the cockpit. And the fact that we've got forward facing seats means that you feel relatively well integrated here. Across the companionway on the starboard side, we've got a really big L-shaped settee with a fold out table. Up a step to the higher level here of the saloon, there is a massive lounge, occupies the entire space on the port side with a coffee table. And that looks across to some cabinetry, some storage on the starboard side, which on this test boat features the optional bucket seat that faces back across. Really sociable little touch, that. But before we get to that, let's just take a look at this galley, because that in itself is a very neat section of the boat. It's a good size apart from anything. Relatively raised in terms of the worktop height, which is very welcome, increases volume of storage, while giving you a much more comfortable place to work. And if we look at this unit that we kind of pointed out earlier and open this cupboard, you'll see that the space extends a good way aft, makes good use of the space inside that unit in the cockpit. So that's a clever little touch. There's a nice big fridge here with a freezer underneath. Decent bit of high level storage, but still decent views for a 6-footer. Here's a 4-ring induction hob, and down below an oven. We also have a lovely deep drained ice locker there on the port side, plus a couple of stainless steel sinks and some extra work surface. We also have the optional dishwasher on this boat and a couple of bins stowed neatly away in here with retaining catches, so you can do your recycling and they don't come open at sea. I like this too. This little partition here, of course, is designed to stop splashes making their way forward onto the seating on the upper level of that saloon, but it's very low slung, which means that the integration between these various zones here as elsewhere on the boat feels very natural and fluid. And it's the same story on the starboard side here at this settee. Now, of course, it comes with a fold-out table, but if you leave it in position, you've got a couple of cup holders and very easy access around there. When we fold it out, well, look, here we do have properly sunken hinges that run flush, so you don't trip your bottles up when you're sliding them around. So I would expect to see that on other tables on board this boat. But this integration between zones I'm talking about is in evidence here as well. Even though we have a step up between the lower saloon and the upper saloon, that's kind of tempered and softened by the fact that it's integrated into a seat that straddles the two zones. And as we step up onto the higher level, well, this is absolutely enormous. You could easily seat, I reckon, 10 people here, plus, of course, an additional one here. As I say, this is an optional seat, but it's certainly one I would look to take, because this feels like it straddles the two zones as well. You feel like part of the lower saloon party as well as the upper saloon party. It's very nice. But it does mean that when people are trying to watch the television, which raises out of there, you need to shift your bum, otherwise you'll get directly in their way. This table, incidentally, is not a standard piece of equipment. It shouldn't really be there. The table that is designed to be here is much lower profile and smaller, so you can actually fit your knees in here and still use it in comfort. And if you make our way straight down, well, what we find down here is exactly what we find on the Princess S65. So we have the full beam master cabin aft. We have the VIP cabin forward. We have a twin cabin on the starboard side. And unlike the S72, we have a bunk rather than twin cabin on the port side. But it's still 4 cabins to sleep 8 people, which is a very impressive feat given that it lacks the scale of that S72. And we'll start with the VIP cabin. As you can see, the bed is significantly raised, which means it occupies a very good taper-free shape, and there's good space on both sides to access it. A symmetrical layout here, very attractive inset LED lighting, decent size of windows and plenty of high-level storage. Additional storage drawers beneath that bed because it's so raised. And storage on both sides, far lower profile on the starboard side, as you can see. But this, of course, is a spot where you might sit to do your makeup in the morning or to do your hair. We've got a mirror right there. And of course, true to form, Princess has made good use of the space behind that as well. Built-in TV here. And over on the port side, if we open that door, we have access to the VIP's own private ensuite. And that really is a very, very good size. It's a good size in terms of the footprint. And as you can see, it's a good size in terms of the headroom as well. More of these lovely sinks that we've seen on various models in the Princess range. A separate shower. No rain shower, but this is of course the VIP cabin rather than the owner's cabin. We'll see that remedied when we go further aft and take a look at that. In fact, we'll do that right now. We'll take a look at the owner's cabin. It's another couple of steps down. And as you'd expect, as we go down, there is some storage space beneath those steps and a little washer dryer. So if you choose to take a longer cruise, you're well equipped for that. As for the cabin itself, well, that is a very, very generous size. And the thing that immediately stands out for me, aside from the enormous hull windows, is the fact that you've got some proper seating. It always makes me wonder why designers put a bed in the centre, cabinetry on one side, cabinetry on the other side, as though storage is the be-all and end-all. Whereas in fact, a seat like this means you can actually spend a bit of time down here just relaxing, reading a book, chilling out with your partner before you go to bed, before you join the party upstairs. And there are options here too. If you don't like this particular settee, then you can rid yourselves of these 2 cabinets, have a settee on either side and a table in the middle so that you can use it as a proper breakfast bar. But certainly, I think that's very attractive indeed. Lots and lots of storage on the starboard side. A good size of bed. A relatively plain fit out, you would have to say, but very elegant too. A mix of materials. Plenty more inset LED lighting and the TV flush mounted into the bulkhead there forward. And if I look aft, well, this is a very useful space. The ensuite facilities run transverse directly behind the bedhead, and that makes loads of sense. Kind of occupies a corridor-like space with a good size of sink and work surface, a toilet, and a really good size of shower with generous natural light and a rain shower up top. Easily big enough for 2 people. It's a lovely space in its own right, but the fact that it's orchestrated this way means that it separates the living spaces from the engine room behind that bulkhead just that bit more convincingly. Really limits the noise. And if you listen very carefully, that distant whir, that is the noise of the generator, which is running as we speak, and it's very muted indeed. So that's excellent. If I spin around past that full-length mirror, we've also got plenty of storage space in here. As you would expect, Princess is not inclined to waste any volume at all. Now let's move further forward, back up these 3 steps and check out the other 2 guest cabins. We'll start on the starboard side with the twin. And as you can see, it doesn't occupy a tremendous footprint, but it's certainly big enough for a twin. It's beautifully fitted out as you'd expect, and the whole window is again extremely large with a couple of port lights. More hanging storage here, plenty of that, and as you can see, lots of headroom once again. Easily enough for a man of 6'5", I would have thought. And if I just spin around and hit this button, you'll see that this bed quickly becomes a double, and without the need for runners in your carpet. It's a very clever little system, all concealed. And as it slides over, it conceals one bedside table and opens up another companionway inboard with an additional bedside table at the head end. So it works really beautifully, that. It's a very impressive space, as I say, not huge, but perfectly functional. And if I close that door over and open this door forward, you'll see that it also comes with an ensuite, which of course is designed to be used as a day head and to service the bunk room on the port side. Once again, it's a good size. More excellent headroom, a separate shower, toilet behind the door there. A really good size. But let's make our way out of here now through these Jack and Jill doors into the central companionway and head aft for a little look at that final cabin on the port side. Now, as I say, on the S72, this is a twin cabin, but because of the space constraints on the smaller 65, this is what you get, a bunk cabin instead. Now, obviously, if you have your choice, you're going to take the top bunk for the extra light, the extra space, the extra headroom, and the better views through that nice big whole window. But although the lower bunk looks a little constrained, as a 6-footer, I had a good lie down in here, and it's perfectly comfortable. As long as you don't try to sit up in bed, you wouldn't really feel shortchanged at all. And as elsewhere on this boat, your beds are supplemented with plenty of additional storage. The engineering spaces on this boat are also particularly interesting. So let's head down into the engine bay, which as you can see is access to the leading edge of this cockpit, and see what we see down there. Now, I land on this checker plate and spin around. You'll see that these are the two mighty MAN V12 1400s, 24 litre block. Really do fill the space. So if you're going to come down here and service them, you need to be an engineer of fairly modest proportions, I would suggest. We've got air conditioning units on both sides as well, plus these huge 2050 litre tanks with a little bit of insulating material inboard of those just to minimise reverberation. There's the big exhausts, and of course the shafts head aft beneath that checker plate through the hull. And here's our generator, which is operating as we speak, as you can probably hear. And this here is the leading edge of our tender garage. That's the V for the trough, the part that you slot the tender into. What's particularly interesting here is the fact that firstly, it's relatively compact, and secondly, it's missing some key engineering articles. And the reason for that is that we've got a separate engineering space further aft on the port side. So we're going to take a look at that right this minute. Get out of the heat. That's better. Here it is, just up the top of the steps on the port side. Access to this port engineering space is pretty decent. There's a good size of aperture, as you can see. A relatively steep ladder again, but once you're down in here, it's used in pretty much the same way as the engineering space on the port side of the S72. Now the first thing you notice is this, of course, and that's the protrusion from that big tender garage. There's still room though for plenty of kit. We've got the air conditioning units further forward there. We've got a seakeeper just beneath that. And if you look at that and think, well, that looks offset to me, that doesn't look central, you'd be absolutely right, but it doesn't have to be central, a gyro, in order to be effective. Spinning round, we've got plenty of space here for additional storage of your fenders. Back here we got your domestic battery systems and your starter batteries, and we also got the hydraulic system further aft. And if I just bend under here and take a look past these fenders, you'll see these bulkheads here. Well, they're the bulkheads that cordon off that crew cabin. So if you opt for this boat without the crew cabin, you can get rid of these, open up this space and relocate that generator from the engine room further forward into this space further aft, just separating it that bit more from the owner's cabin. If you enjoyed the new Princess S72 that we tested towards the end of last year, but you just fancy something a little bit more affordable or a little bit more manageable, this new S65 might be just the ticket. Now, of course, it does lack some of the key features that made the larger S72 so appealing, not least the private owner's staircase on the port side or the raised companion seating at the forward end of the saloon. But in all practical regards, if you're a keen family cruiser, this does pretty much everything the S72 does. You get 4 cabins to sleep 8 people. You get the option of a crew cabin. You get that lovely big tender garage, the separate engineering space, and you get all kinds of alfresco deck space with configurable furniture. So if you're tempted by the fact that the all-in price comes in at about 30% less than the larger boat, then you need to get yourself to the Cannes Yachting Festival in September and check this one out.